In part 5, we establish a relationship between the two tables, autos and owners. Now that we have two tables in our database, both have been assigned primary keys, and they share a column which is the primary key in the owners table and the foreign key in autos table, and that is the column which will be used for establishing the relationship between the two tables. So we need to go to Database Tools and click on Relationships. So under Show Table, we need to click on the button Show Table, select both tables. We don't have any choice, we only have two. And then you have got to save the selection. Okay, save the relationship. Now, this is the foreign key in autos table, which can now link to the primary key in the owners table. So you just drag the foreign key to the primary key of the other table, and that will bring up the table which will give us the options of what to do with all this. So we enforce referential integrity. For now, don't worry about any of these notions. We'll talk about it later when we do other Access projects. Cascade update related fields and cascade delete related records. We do all this to ensure there aren't any duplicate records in the tables. And after all this, we simply close the window. By default, we have created one-to-many relationships. We talked in class about this sign. In this case, infinity simply means many. So what this tells us is that in our database, we have owners who can have more than one car, but each car can only have one owner. This is the end. Need to close this, and this is the end of step 5. Now that we have a real database in which we have two tables which are related to each other, we have a real relational database, we can query this database. So the reason for establishing relationships, in this case one relationship between the tables, was to be able to answer questions which will require data from both tables. So a query is an answer to a business question, and the answer is in the form of a table. So this is our last exercise on this project. First question, create a query that provides the answer to this question. Who owns a Cadillac CTS? We also have a hint. Display owner full name where make equals Cadillac and model equals CTS. So where is the word to pay attention to. Very important in querying. To create a query, we go to create. Then we have to design a query for this particular exercise. Click on that. Now we have to select our tables, owners and autos. I just double clicked on these tables. You could have just clicked add. There are two ways of selecting the tables. So we are looking for who is the owner. Who owns means who is the owner. And the available information is that the make is Cadillac and model is CTS. So both of those criteria, we call these criteria, they're listed in the autos table. So here in the first field, we need to know the answer to this question, who is the owner. This could have been also done this way, by selecting the field from the drop-down menu. Okay, what we do have is the make listed in the tables in the table autos. Okay, make, and then we take up the third field for the second criterion, and that's the model. Okay, now as is required in any querying, we have to manually enter the criteria with the double quotation marks. So Cadillac, and CTS. Now every single character has to be correct. One wrong character will ruin the query. Okay. So we now save the query. The default name is fine, query 1, because this is question 1. And now we have a new table, which is query, and this is the answer to our question. This person, Mary Madison, owns Cadillac CTS. So these data are in the autos table, and the name is in the owners table. Once again, I'll try to increase the font for legibility. That's a little better. Also, as we build our query, Access is writing the SQL code, structured query language code. And learning SQL is the ultimate goal of taking database class. Down here on the bottom of the Access window, there's a button, SQL View. If you click on it, you'll see what SQL code should look like for this query. Select from, and then where. These are most important SQL commands. Where is called a clause. We'll close it now. Now we don't want to change this, okay? And then we'll have to move on to the second question. So in the first question, we were looking for the owner's name, and we would expect that to come from the owner's table. In this question, second question, we're looking for the autos. What autos? And we need to list their make, model, and the year are registered to Patty Palmer. Once again, we're looking at both tables here. In this case, you must type the quotation marks around Palmer Patty and then save it as query 2. So when you save it, Access automatically runs the query, but you can also run it before saving it. We'll do it in this example. So we need to have 4 criteria here. We have 3 criteria to enter, and 1 will display as the answer. Once again, we go to create, then query design. Same process. We have 2 tables which are related. Okay. Now, we do have this as a criterion. Owner's name. So we have to enter it as has been written there, with quotation mark and exactly spelled exactly as her name is spelled in the owner's table. Palmer, comma, space, Patty, quotation marks. Okay, so we need to list make, model, and year from this table. Make, double click on make. So these 2 columns are taken. Double click on model, the next one is taken, and year. If these check boxes are somehow not checked, you have to check them manually because this is required for the answer. So we're not going to just save it. We'll run it first to see what's showing. Okay, and as usual, we're going to increase the font size for legibility. So Patty Palmer owns Volkswagen. This is not the right spelling. Jetta 2004 and Buick Sentra 2006. Buick Sentra. I think it was Nissan Sentra, but this is the right answer. So we're going to save the query as query 2. That was question 2, and move on. In question 3, we'll need to know the driver's license of the driver whose name is Kate Kelly. So once again, we have to know our tables, and we have to know the columns and the field names in the tables. So this question suggests that we're going to only use the owner's table because we know that autos does not have these fields. So we go to query design, as we have done already, and only bring up one table. Name is the first field we are interested in because that's how we're going to list our criterion. And what we are after is driver's license number. And once again, we have to use quotation marks and enter the name exactly as it appears in the table. Kate. Once again, we're going to run the query. And her driver's license is now listed. And we kept the font, which is good. Okay, we can save it as query 3. We've answered 3 questions now. And by the way, this is the table. Although we only have one row, this is a one-row table. So once again, a query is an answer in the form of a table. We can close it now, and you can see that our database has grown. It has more and more objects in it. We have 2 tables. We have a form, and now 3 queries. 2 against 2 tables, and 1 against 1 table. So for query 4, we have to create a query which will now have a calculation in it. We need to have the average driver's license exam score for all the owners. So we know from the tables that we have created that once again we'll be querying only the owners table. So the usual process will now start. Query design, owners table. However, in this case, our options here for querying do not contain anything that can allow us to make calculations. To do that, we have to select this totals button, and we have just, by pressing this button, we have just added the total option to querying. So now we are interested in the score. It knows which table it belongs to, but now we have to select average AVG to answer this question. The query is ready to run, and this is our answer, 83.6. Of course, this answer will differ from person to person depending on what points you have, what score you have given to yourself when you entered the new data, the new row into the owners table. We can now save this as query 4, it was question 4, and close. And the last question we'll have to answer involves grouping the averages by the city. So there's going to be a small complication here, and we are going to use our experience with the previous query. So we start as usual with query design. We know we only need one table here, but we also know from the previous query that we'll have to click on totals button to have the averaging option. So we're almost repeating our previous calculation, average, but now we're asked to group the calculation by the city. Group by the city. Group the average by the city. You see the exclamation point, the query is ready to run. But now we'll just save as query 5. You see how large database now is, and close it. So to finish this, you can just run the 5 queries now. They are stored in the database. Every time you need to run them, you just double click on them and they will give you the same answers. And the reason why we do this is that this table may change. We may have more owners here. Some owners may leave the county or the state. So as changes occur in the table, they will be reflected in the queries. Okay, this is the end of this project.